doing yet another discussion on stuff that has been weighing heavily on me since the FEI's rule revision. And I kind of just wanted to continue opening a conversation to discuss the normalization of abuse in the horse industry and all of the factors that kind of uphold this type of mindset. Um, and just share my experiences and also share some of the things that are used to try to pressure people into not talking about these things. Because just like there's collective action to normalize mistreatment of horses, there's also collective action to try to silence anyone who speaks out against it and pressure them into feeling like they are the ones in the wrong. There's also a lot being done to make people feel like they are the victim when they're met with uncomfortable commentary about the horse world and like criticisms. Um, and ultimately, like, I think that all of us, like even people who see the FEI rule revision for what it is and have a problem with it, all of us, I think, need to be doing work to like unpack the indoctrination that we've had in the horse world, because most of us have been taught to normalize practices that are harmful and to not notice horse stress behaviors. And it starts from a very young age. Literally walk into any tack store and go look at how much they have for coercive and aversive equipment and how they create products like whips and will make them kid friendly by making them sparkly, making them pink, making them have a heart or a star at the end of it. And that's just one example of an item, like of a piece of equipment that is used for the purpose of pushing horses to do things and creating aversion and training. Being made out to be some cutesy little thing. And we get taught to just do these things from the start of our riding career, and it normalizes it. There's hyper normalization, and people aren't making the connection between that hyper normalization of the smaller forms of mistreatment and how that feeds into people then going on to justify the bigger forms of abuse. Because we're seeing that right now, especially with the Melbourne Cup controversy. With people being like, oh, the horse just bit their cheek, it's no big deal, it's just a minor wound. And that's their knee-jerk reaction, is to just explain it away and to downplay the issue, rather than looking at this and going, hey, like, what if there was a way we could make this less likely to happen? Why are horses biting themselves? What increases the risk factors of that? And just asking more questions. But people don't want to ask questions. They want to explain stuff away without having to look further into it, which is why the horse world has gotten to the point that it has. I think that if this were actually about ethics and wanting the best for the horse, people would look at these occurrences and the frequency with which they occur, and at the bare minimum, they would want to look further into them. But the problem is people just want all this stuff to get buried and swept under the rug without any further thought. And that enables abusers to continue doing what they're doing. And it also continues to perpetuate a culture of lack of education about how the practices we use and the equipment we use actually are impacting the horses. And everyone is complicit in that type of attitude because the industry has varying degrees and layers of these types of attitudes that are creating this behavior. Starting with people who try to bully anyone who asks questions or questions what they're told to do and isn't super comfortable with what they're told to do with horses. People are made to feel stupid or too soft or too sensitive when they ask legitimate questions that, if horse people weren't so hyper defensive, should just be getting answered at face value. But instead, the person who's asking questions and going like, hey, like, why do we spur horses? Or why are you hitting the horse for doing something wrong? They're made to feel like they are in the wrong simply for asking a question. And I think that level of defensiveness is a sign of underlying shame and guilt, because if it were truly justifiable and if all these things could just be explained away and through an ethical lens, people wouldn't feel the need to be so hyper defensive. So basically what I'm calling for is more research and just more data tracking across the entire industry, because we should be having people who are curious. So if we're seeing horses biting their tongues or their cheeks in competitions, let's look at what factors contribute to that. What equipment are the horses who are biting their tongues or cheeks wearing? Are they wearing tongue ties? Are they wearing flashes? What kind of bits do they have? All of the above. what types of riders and disciplines are seeing certain types of accidents, injuries, and abuses occurring more regularly. Because we have research currently that is showing concerning trends in the industry, and there hasn't been a whole lot of effort of putting further thought into that. Like even just the studies on bits, this is not going to be an anti-bit discussion, and I hate the fact that I have to preface any criticism that I make about bits or any concern or critique with that, because that's how hyper defensive horse people are. That if the mere criticism of a piece of equipment that they use is viewed as a whole attack, because they're that desperate to evade any type of criticism. But the studies we have on bits and the amount of bit lesions that we're seeing, even in higher level horses with the best of the best riders, that in itself should be a sign that there's concerning trends. It should be something where we go, we should look further into this, because this could be a bigger problem than what we think it is. And already the studies we do have are showing that it's a more regular problem than we think. And having spoke, like, again, this is anecdotes, so I can't like prove this because there's no studies involved, but it's also very expensive to put on studies. Like I would love to get the team together to be able to data track and prove what I've been seeing and what I've been told by other people in the community, but it's a huge undertaking and it's very expensive. And this is why I get so frustrated with organizations like the FEI, because they have the means, they have the money, and they're just choosing not to do it. And I think the reason for that is because they know if they put their money into this type of research, it would be damning for the industry and they'd be forced to make changes. And then the proof would be out there and they couldn't deny it and try to sweep it under the rug and whatnot. But having talked to bit fitters, veterinarians, different types of trainers, body workers, etc., bit lesions and damage to the mouth are way more common than what people want to admit. And even we, like with nose bands, we know that bony lesions and bone irregularities are pretty common from too tightly fitted nose bands. And these things aren't being documented. So it's just like hearsay where people are noticing these things, but they don't have the capacity to actually data track all of the instances that they're noticing them in, the severity of them, and what horses they're impacting. And the thing is, it's not due to a lack of occurrence of these problems. It's due to a lack of data being tracked and a lack of desire to look further into these issues. And then it continues to perpetuate the cycle of abuse. And like I said, most of us have been conditioned to not see things for the issues that they are, because horse stress is so under taught. Like we're not taught to recognize the earlier signs of stress, and even signs of acute stress. A lot of people are taught that it's just excitement, and especially when it's pertaining to sport horses, they'll be told, oh, they're just excited to do their job, even when all of the behaviors are consistent with stress. And people don't want to admit that they might be wrong in their assessment, because it would mean reflecting on the entirety of the industry and what they believe to be true about horses and all the horses that they handle. And it crashes your perspective of what the industry is supposed to be like. So basically what I like, this is like such a complex issue and there's so many different moving parts, but the point that I want to make is that people are being bullied into silence. They're being conditioned by the overarching community to just shut up and not question anything and just do what they're told, and never have the audacity to question anyone. Once they've gotten above a certain level of competition, they suddenly become untouchable, and they can't even be criticized for things like terrible equitation that's actually impacting the horse or causing spur marks because their leg is so bad. Meanwhile, if an amateur or junior rider was doing that at a lower level, they would be absolutely crucified online. And if anything, people who are at the top levels should be held to a higher standard than people who are junior or amateur riders or competing at the lower levels, because they're setting the standard for the entire sport. But instead of that, they're not. People just assume that because they've made it to that level, that they're ethical, that they care about horse welfare, that they're capable of reading stress behaviors, and that they're the go-to experts on these topics. Meanwhile, none of these riders at the top levels have any type of equine sciences education. Usually they don't have any type of behavioral certifications. They don't have any type of in-depth education that makes them a voice for horse welfare and horse behavior. Yet people go to them for that expertise, in addition to justifying all types of riding expertise because of the level that they ride at. And that's not okay. It's corrupt. It's elitist. It's rooted in elitism. And a lot of what we're seeing in the horse sports is just repeating themes that we're already seeing in society. And I think that's why I'm getting so frustrated about witnessing it, and why it's just starting to drive me up the wall, because I've also noticed that the more I speak out about this, the more I'm pressured to shut up, and people will use varying degrees of attempts to pressure me into silence. They'll use like degradation, calling me stupid, telling me I'm a nobody, that I'm only doing this because I failed out as a trainer and I just suck, and like no horses like me and no one will hire me. And they just create this whole narrative to try to just shit on my character and make me succumb to their abuse and just stop talking, which hasn't worked. And then when that hasn't worked, they tend to move the goalpost, where it's like, oh, well, you still ride horses. Baitless bridles can be abused. And they bring up all of these other things to be like, oh, well, see, this is why you shouldn't criticize this much more acute form of abuse, because blah, 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 blah. And it's not done in good faith, because they're not doing it to be like, hey, I'm actually concerned about all of these issues of abuse and how other equipment can be misused. They're using it to deflect away from valid criticisms and use whataboutism to try to just turn attention away. It's not done in good faith. And we also see this just in regular human society, where it's essentially just the advocate Olympics, where you're never like leftist enough, you're never liberal enough, you're never advocating for enough things in the animal sphere. Like I get people being like, oh, why don't you talk about the people who are using like bears for bear shows across the world, or the horses getting abused in third world countries? And they'll bring up all of these other issues that, yes, they're issues, but the fact that those issues exist doesn't cancel out the issues we're seeing in the horse world. And people who bring these up, every single time that I've seen someone do this, I go and check their page to see if they're advocating about these things that they claim to care about, that they claim are more important than these issues in the horse world. They never do. They only bring up these other ethical issues to deflect from the ones that they do not want to see covered, because they make them feel uncomfortable. And that in itself, I think, shines a spotlight on what people are actually trying to do and what the intent is behind their words, because it's not about promoting other ethical issues that they feel actually need to be in the spotlight. It's about trying to bring up something that they perceive as worse to deflect from something that they don't want people to look at. And that attitude continuously happens in the horse world. So my hope is that one day we'll get to the point where people will realize that everyone who's trying to protect the horse sport by sweeping stuff under the rug, by making excuses, by getting defensive, by trying to encourage people to look the other way, everyone who's doing that is actually engaging the very types of behaviors that make a ban much more likely. Because ultimately a ban comes from people feeling like there's no possibility of reform, like there's no possibility of improving the horse world as a whole. That's where a ban comes from, is people have lost hope in the capacity for horse people to actually engage in ethical practice. And by continuing to double down, defend, deflect, deny, and downplay the issues in the horse sports, we are handing that belief for a ban, that that's the best path forward, to these people on a silver platter. If instead horse people actually looked at the issues and went, you know, I don't think horses should be bleeding from the mouth in competition. That is bad. It doesn't matter if the horse bit his cheek, because that's still probably painful. This shouldn't be normalized in competition. What can we do to make these instances less likely? What contributes to it? Why would a horse bite their cheek? Because also, this cheek biting excuse for bloody mouths, people need to consider the fact that horses are literally grazing animals. They are wired to be eating and chewing for the vast majority of their daily time budget. If it was very common in regular circumstances where people are not interfering with the mouth of the horse, are not putting them in stressful circumstances, and are not just slapping a ton of equipment on their face to disable natural use of the mouth. If it were common for horses to bite their cheeks and their tongues in normal circumstances, you would see it a lot more, because of how often they are chewing and eating. Like they spend like 17 hours a day chewing and eating when we give them the opportunity. But that's not happening, because it is human induced 99% of the time. And just because you can find the fluke occurrence where a horse bites their tongue in the field or has an accident of their own accord without any humans involved, that does not mean that people aren't influencing these things that we then label as accidents and try to absolve ourselves of any accountability for. So what this means for the industry is that I think the path forward, if anyone wants to actually salvage horse sports and have people, the general public, have faith that horse people can actually be ethical, the path forward is radical honesty, radical accountability. commitment to holding ourselves accountable, looking at the problems, acknowledging them, because ultimately, if we recognize it's a bad look, like the primary excuse for a lot of these images is that it's just a moment in time and that it's not representative of the whole sport, which means these people are aware that those moments look bad. They are aware that it's not good. But instead of like looking at those moments and go, hey, like we don't want to see that. And also these moments are being replicated way too much. They're just going, oh, it's just a moment in time, and immediately just shrugging off any possibility that these moments are happening too often and trying to explain it away. So they're aware that these things are issues, but they're desperate to try to explain them away without looking further into them. If instead we looked at these problems and went, that is a bad moment in time. We shouldn't be seeing so many hyperflexed horses repeatedly photographed in competition. We shouldn't be seeing entire dressage tests where the horse is behind the vertical for the vast majority of the test. We shouldn't be seeing horses having blood in their mouths in competition so much. We shouldn't be seeing oral pain behaviors so much. We should be doing things to prevent this, because this whole notion of like, oh, sometimes accidents happen, horses bite their tongues in their cheeks. When we have disciplines like show jumping, where you can just shove whatever the fuck you want in your horse's mouth and call it a day, and just crank them around a jump course at 1.60 meters, kicking them over fences and ripping their face off, it's disingenuous to try to be like, oh, they just bit their tongue in their cheek, because there's not protections in place to make that less likely. Riders are emboldened to select whatever equipment they want, do whatever they want, and have no real repercussions for it. And this is why the blood rule revision with the FEI is even worse, because it specifically states that even in the case that it's caused by equipment or the athlete, meaning the rider, that it will still just get a warning. When really, if you look at something and you go, this horse is bleeding as a result of the equipment selected or how the rider is riding them, why should that person be allowed to continue competing? They should just be immediately disqualified. And what it should have been is elimination. And then they could have upped the ante for that rule and been like, okay, if someone has an offense where they get 2 blood offenses in the span of a calendar year, they get suspended, in addition to getting disqualified from the competitions in which they have blood occur on the horse. And we could also be doing equipment regulations to try to make it less likely that riders can select equipment that is so harsh and aversive that it increases the likelihood of horses having blood happen. But we're not doing any of that. People are just denying all of the contributing factors, denying how often this is reoccurring, and trying to get everyone to look the other way. And it's not going to work. There's too many people with cameras. There's too much publicity on the horse sport now. The more we deny, the worse the horse sport looks, and the less hope the general public is going to have that we can turn this all around. So there needs to be more tack and equipment regulations. There needs to be more accountability. There needs to be more awareness of horse stress. And as far as I'm concerned, in competition, if it is about horse welfare, there's quite literally no reason to not have horse welfare professionals directly involved in the judging and the maintaining of rules. So anytime where you have something that's subjectively judged, like dressage, why are we not having behavioral experts in the judging booth with the judges, or at the bare minimum having judges have to have a behavioral education of some sort so that they're not deliberately rewarding stressed horses? If it's about horse welfare, why are we not having welfare professionals and behavioral experts and equine scientists on the ground with the stewards, noticing things that stewards might overlook? Why are we not having behavioral educations for the stewards? This is an issue that I brought up 2 years ago at the Equine Welfare Conference in France, and it was just not applied whatsoever. They didn't further the education of the stewards, and they continue to maintain this notion that the FEI cares about and protects horse welfare, but then they're not doing anything in practice to display that. And it's just very annoying to watch, because people are just trying to collectively gaslight each other. Oh, thank you so much, Sugar and Spice. That's really nice of you. That rhymes. I did not mean to do that, but thank you. Thank you for your support. But it's not happening in practice. We're seeing collective gaslighting where people are doing things in the public eye, being caught on camera doing it, and then going, oh, no, I'm not. That didn't happen. Or like, oh, it was just a fluke. It's not a big deal. And just immediately shrugging it off with no accountability. There is no accountability. There, even with this situation with the Melbourne Cup, a lot of people are like, oh, he just bit his tongue. It was just an accident. Whatever. It's no big deal. He was fine. He didn't die. It wasn't a big injury. And it's like, yeah, it wasn't a big injury, but he bit his mouth. He had a tongue tie on. He had a bit on. He had a flash nose band on that was quite tight. And he was put in a stressful environment. in what world can we try to pretend that there is no human influence there? Like, it is just ignorant, and we're just letting full grown adults just completely let themselves off the hook and avoid any and all accountability. And I cannot stand watching it. Because radical honesty is the way forward. This is why I bring up all the shit that I used to do, and I'm very transparent about it, because I think that it's important to note that you can, in fact, admit to the shitty things that you have done to horses and move past it and show changed behavior. This fear of being vulnerable and admitting to wrongdoing and changing and growing and altering your practices as a result is leading people to continue participating in abuse, full stop. On top of that, I do think there's a component of it where people don't want to have to deal with the discomfort of learning new practices and changing the way that they approach horses, because it would mean putting a lot of work in and altering their show seasons and their current plans and their dreams in accordance with ethics. And that is a huge undertaking. And it is something that deters people from wanting to make the change, because I do remember that as I started to have questions about the ethics of the industry and I started to experience discomfort about some of the stuff that had been normalized to me that I was doing, one of the biggest obstacles was the fact that it was like, okay, but to accept all of this means that I'm going to have to commit to a path of changing without knowing what my path forward looks like yet, without knowing how my part in the horse world is going to change as a result. And that was very off-putting because it's committing to the unknown. And it's hard, but it's also worth it, because I do think that part of these people's frustration, defensiveness, and anger stems from the fact that deep down they know that there's something wrong. And when people bring that to light publicly, it makes them violently uncomfortable. And instead of sitting with that discomfort and asking why it exists, they lash out at the people who made them uncomfortable by saying things. Because ultimately, like, if you're confident in what you're doing, you shouldn't be losing your shit and like coming onto the pages of people that, like, I get told all the time that I'm just a nobody and that I'm not a real trainer. And I've gotten told that by people who are high up in the horse world. I've gotten told that by like FEI level course designers who have been super fucking rude to me. And then I submitted to their employers. People who have competed at like 5-star level eventing, like the owner of my virtual eventing coach fucking hates me. She, at least 3 times a year, she loses her shit and goes on like a week-long tear on my Facebook page and just comments the nastiest things about how I'm a nobody and I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's like, if they believed that, they would be able to just block me and move on with their life. But the reason why they can't is because they are fucking terrified of more and more people starting to think differently than them and hold them more accountable and having to change the way that they do things. They are scared of that. And that's why they can't let this go. And that's why you're seeing high profile people having these visceral reactions to things, because they cannot explain or justify. Another example of this type of behavior is recently I did a video on that, that I forget what the company's called, but it's a thing that punishes horses for pawing and kicking at their stall door by spraying them with water. And I pointed out the fact that it's just a behavioral suppressant, that pawing and kicking at the door comes from a place of anticipatory stress and anxiety or boredom. And that's why it's so heavily correlated with stalling. And that by adding a punisher without addressing any of the things leading to that behavior existing in the first place is just suppressing a coping mechanism and leaving the horse to have to cope with an abundance of stress, and that it is not ethical, especially when the product is being marketed and sold without any of that context behind it. The owner of that company, despite that video only getting like 1,800 views, lost his fucking marbles and was trying to threaten me with a lawsuit and saying that I was being defamatory. And I'm like, I'm not. It is a well-known fact that punishment is a behavioral suppressant. And it is a well-known fact that it results in conflict behavior and follow-up behavior as a result. And it is a fact that if you're using, especially as the primary punisher, something that you want the horse to be okay with in other contexts, like spray bottles or the hose, it's not a good idea to use that as a punisher. So I was like, no, I'm not going to remove this video. I'm not going to alter what I'm saying unless you can prove that for whatever reason, punishment being a behavioral suppressant does not apply to your product. But they couldn't. And then I also pointed out the fact that they were saying that they have vet recommendations. And I was like, what vet endorsed your product? I have some questions to ask. Do they have any behavioral education? Why did they endorse this product? And what is their justification for why this wouldn't be a behavioral suppressant? Wouldn't release what vet did it. Didn't elaborate further. So my question is, did a vet actually endorse it? And if so, why are they not comfortable having their name be left if they actually stand by that product? But yeah, Claiming defamation for people pointing out stuff that is documented on video and online and in their words is super, super common. It is one of the most common threats that I have gotten from any type of horse person who, like, I share a video and I go, hey, this noseband's too tight. And they're like, that's defamation. It's like, I can literally see it pressing into your horse's face, even though their teeth are together. And there's videos. We can see this. It's not defamation to point something out. People are trying to label defamation as talking about characteristics that are readily present, easily provable, just because they're not flattering characteristics to point out. And ultimately, it's like, if you're embarrassed by people pointing out what they see you literally doing and what you're endorsing, don't do it then. If you're embarrassed by people accurately saying what you're doing, don't do it then. But to the question, can I ask you roughly what portion of the people in the racing industry seem to actually take the horse's welfare seriously? Are more people in support or against it, in your opinion? Honestly, like, that industry is really complicated because there's a lot of old school mentalities, and you have these people who've grown up in horse racing families where they've been indoctrinated into the sport and taught certain things as the truth from the time they are children. And when you're constantly surrounded by horses who are chronically stressed, you don't view it as stress. You label the behaviors as other things and you call them quirks, or you say that these horses are just excited and that they're athletes. So there's a whole lot of collective gaslighting and cognitive dissonance going on in that industry, where you have people who do actually care about their horses. And in their own way, they think that they value welfare, but their perspective is so skewed by misinformation and being indoctrinated into believing things that are not true, that they cannot see past it. And then they're also not willing to reflect and consider alternative perspectives because they have an excuse for everything. And what you then see with these type of people is that even when you produce empirical evidence that proves them wrong, they don't even want to read the studies. Like, I remember when I was in that frame of mind, like years ago, I wouldn't even open studies that would make me uncomfortable. What I would go and do is try to find conflicting studies that would support the perspective that I want to believe, even if there was way less of them and they were way less credible. And that's what we see people doing, where they're seeking confirmation bias, and they don't want to accept they don't want to accept these things as reality because it would disrupt their entire worldview of horses. So I would say that, like, there's a lot of people who in their hearts want to be supportive of horse welfare, but they're prevented from doing so by their own personal biases. And then also the other issue is that if you do start to see it for what it is, and you do start to hold yourself to a higher standard, and you do start to make complaints and talk about things, you get ostracized from the community. You get pushed out of the community. It's like having a cult turn on you. And this does not just apply to horse racing. It applies to, like, all aspects of the horse industry, where you get made violently uncomfortable. People want to cause you harm. They want to harm your business. They want to harm you as a person, and they want to just take you down because you are drawing light. You're shining light on something that they don't want people to see. But like, the average racehorse trainer that's not competing at the top levels is not making very much money. So it's honestly not financially motivated in the sense that they're profiting to the tune of thousands. The financial motivation for people who are just like regular everyday racehorse trainers probably stems from the fact that if they don't make their living off of training these horses, that they cannot pay rent and they cannot pay for their life. And the casinos and stuff that own these racetracks are honestly very exploitative. They don't prioritize the horses. They make the fees for the trainers to keep the horses there very high, and the facilities usually aren't updated and very good, especially at like smaller racetracks that aren't bringing in as much money. So there's a lot of corruption and problems involved with that. So I would say, like, it's no different than the rest of the horse industry, where you have people who in their hearts, they love their horses and they want to be making their horses happy, but they're in denial of what behaviors their horse is actually presenting and what their horse's welfare is actually saying, because they're entrenched in this idea that some horses are just assholes, some horses are just quirky and difficult, and they view stress behaviors as a personality trait rather than in like a byproduct of the environment, and they're not ready to accept that. And it's unfortunate, because if they would just try to do some of the suggested things to improve the lives and the stressors of horses, they would see a substantial difference in the horse's behavior. And that in theory should convince them. But a lot of people don't even want to try that, so they never get to see the results. They also don't want to look at people who are. And then it prevents any amount of growth. So yeah. So anyways, I just can't with it. Like there's so much anger and defensiveness in the horse world that prevents any forward momentum, and it's going to end up resulting in banning the horse sports. Like the thing that I find ironic is that if horse sports do get banned, like 100% all of these people who've been defending all of these instances of abuse that are getting publicized, they're going to blame advocacy groups. They're going to blame people like me, and they're going to say that we are at fault and it's our fault that the sport got banned. When in reality, if the sport gets banned, it's going to be the result of the horse industry repeatedly refusing to look at the elephant in the room and address the problems and corruption in the industry and actually hold people accountable, and prioritizing making people comfortable and helping people stay at the top levels without having to alter their practices above horse welfare. And if that happens, then we do deserve the sport to be banned. I would prefer to see the sport reformed, but if it's between letting things exist as they are now or having it banned, I would rather see a ban. But I don't think that those are the only two options. But the people who do not want to change are making it out to be like those are the only two options. And they don't look at anything with any nuance. And I think that that is at the core of the issue of a lot of these problems that we're seeing in society, where people are seeing things in a very black and white light, and they fail to see any nuance. And then regarding, a special human being made a post trashing you for defending Tanya in your last stream. She was absolutely watching or something, because I didn't see anyone saying that. I think we should see the humanity in everyone. Like, if I feel like anyone's getting unfairly attacked or getting like I don't think people, regardless of whether or not you agree with what they're doing, and this applies to people who I am talking about at the top levels too, who are very corrupt, I don't think they should have to worry about their health and safety as a result of the things that they're doing, even if they're bad things. I don't think that they should have to, I think that it's very, very hypocritical to essentially approach people with the same type of toxicity and hateful attitude and belief that they cannot be fixed and that they're wholly bad as a human being, and treat them like that if the goal is to reform the industry. Like, we need to leave the door open where it's like, we're going to hold you accountable for your behavior, but we're not going to shit on you as a person and ostracize you from the community completely to the point where you're viewed as a villain and never accepted. Because like, regardless of who we're talking about, people are a byproduct of the industry that they grew up in. There's a reason why so many people with these views exist. And if we don't actually acknowledge the systemic issue, and if instead we're just pointing out individuals, especially amateur riders and people who are not influencing the greater perspectives of the industry itself, we're deflecting blame onto people who are just a byproduct of the rest of the industry, the people who are following the lead of professionals and people who are viewed as experts and having their behavior altered accordingly. Like, obviously, once we're like adults and we're capable of thinking, it's like our job to continue our education and continue learning. But like, I don't think it's helpful to someone to use such shame-based tactics and forceful tactics where you're singling out a single person for months on end and just harassing them. I don't think that that promotes change, especially when it's someone that really doesn't hold a lot of power in the horse world. Like, the FEI is a multi-billion-dollar organization, and they are setting regulations that are impacting thousands of horses. That's something that is like a far-reaching impact, because also their impact reaches everyday equestrians who will never compete at the FEI level, and it influences what they view as normal horsemanship and good horsemanship. A singular individual isn't having that level of impact, and I think it's short-sighted. And honestly, a lot of that stuff, I think, just comes from self-aggrandization and not actually wanting to help make any systemic change, because it just doesn't make sense to have that level of fixation on someone. And I think you can see the humanity in someone without supporting everything that they do. And I think that this idea that in order to actually stand against the things that we don't agree with someone doing, that we have to completely dehumanize them and treat them like shit, I don't agree with that. Especially when we're talking to everyday people. Like I see people that try to weaponize what I'm saying here, and they'll be like, oh, so much for the tolerant left, when I really go in on someone like Donald Trump, for example. But there's a huge difference between the president of one of the wealthiest and most powerful countries in the world, who is doing and saying things that are harming millions and millions of people. Huge difference between really criticizing someone like that and going, this man is like fucking he's a dinosaur. He's so old. He's had so much time to reflect on his behavior and change, and keeps doing terrible things. At this point, I would be okay with ostracizing someone like that from society because he's just a bad person, and I don't see any ability to rehab that type of behavior. But that's a lot different than like an everyday person who you're just like, hey, I don't like how you care for your horse. Especially when in the grand scheme of things, it's not even representative of the worst in the industries. Like any horse that's out for like 12 plus hours a day is doing a lot better than most horses, sadly. That shouldn't, like, we should have higher standards. But yeah, anyways, we're living in a dystopia right now. And I do think that everything that's going on in the States and just across the world right now, I think that is kind of being leveraged by organizations like the FEI, because people are kind of working to try to normalize a lack of empathy right now and make it like an okay thing to do. And it's like, no, we're not going to do that. And like, I think also one thing that I find really annoying online, especially like people who like, I think the biggest issue is people who view me as being like very black and white in my thinking, and not open to other perspectives, don't necessarily watch all of like my content in entirety, because I do try to have a very nuanced perspective, and I don't like vilifying people. And I'm also willing to talk to people about things if they're not being belligerent. With that said, like, I think where people think that I'm stubborn and black and white is when someone's trying to bully me or get me to support their perspective. If I hold my ground and I go, I don't agree with that, and here's why, people view that as slighting against them because they identify so heavily with their perspectives, even when they're not personal to them. And then that becomes where they feel personally attacked by someone not validating their perspective. But that said, like, I just don't even have room to like be like obsessing over a single person or who they are as a person and just like vying for their failure in life. Like, I hope that everyone gets their shit together, because I think that even these terrible people that we're seeing ruin the world, like people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and like the billionaires of the world, I think that they have like a sickness in their soul. And I think that is why they are trying to fill it with money and power and status. I don't think that any of those people are happy people. They're not an indicator of a healthy, well-adjusted human being. They are a sign of an underlying sickness in society that has just completely permeated their entire person. And it goes for like basically anyone who's promoting like unethical practices, where like that's like their primary thing. It's like there's an underlying sickness there if you can't see the humanity in other people and at least want for them to get help. And ultimately, it's like, if what actually makes you happy is like ruining other people's lives, then like you shouldn't be happy. But I think that very desire of like trying to dominate and control other people is an indicator of an underlying problem within the person trying to do that. People also always say you ramble too much or speaking like you're trying to fill out a word count. I have ADHD, so like anyone who fucking says that, you're being ableist. I have a different way of thinking. I have stream of consciousness thinking. Never have I had a problem talking to other people who are neurodivergent, because they understand what I'm saying. And I like to explain my thoughts because I want people to understand. And when you grow up being neurodivergent and you grow up being perpetually misunderstood and forced to conform, and when you don't conform or can't conform, you're treated like shit, you learn to try to explain your way out of shit, because that helps you avoid abuse sometimes. And you're so desperate to be understood and seen and validated in society that you just explain and try to basically plead your humanity to people who don't want to see it. So anyone who says that, one, just doesn't want to listen to what I'm saying. Like, I think that a lot of people read the first line of one of my posts, or listen to maybe 30 seconds of a video, or read the title of it, and then they just decide they don't like it. They don't want to listen to any of it. And I can tell that by the comments that they make about what they perceive my views as, because I get a lot of people being like, you think blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, that's news to me, because I actually said this. And like it's frustrating. Like if you don't want to actually hear where someone's coming from, then don't. But don't make claims about what their perspectives are if you're not willing to hear them, and if you're only going to listen to what other people claim their perspectives are. And that is also different than people saying like, because I with the Charlie Kirk thing, I had a lot of people go, "You're taking what he said out of context." I listened to what he said in full, and I also read the transcripts, and like he's saying the same thing with more words, and people who just are either hateful in their hearts or just want to absolve anyone who identifies within the same demographics as them, they are just getting confused by him adding more words to saying the same thing, because that dude has said way too many fucking terrible things to be let off the hook. And anyone that's willing to look the other way from that probably isn't in a demographic that's being negatively impacted by him. And in my anecdotal experience, I found that to be very true, because the vast majority of his supporters are straight white men and women who are dating radical right straight white men and are in a relationship where they felt the need to conform in order to get love. And that's very sad. So I feel bad for them, but it's just like, yeah, different things. I agree. People's experiences and backgrounds can shape their views. Criticizing, belittling won't change that. It should all be about educating people sympathetically. Yeah, I agree. And like, it is hard to do sometimes, because like some people say the most vile and repulsive shit on my page, and sometimes I do get really snippy and sarcastic and just like cranky because it's so much to read, and I'm just like, you are literally advocating to cause people and like other animals harm for no fucking reason. And it can wear on you sometimes. So I do get snippy sometimes, but it's like that's kind of part of the human experience. And I think ultimately what says the most about someone is like what they consistently do. Like if you know that you've harmed someone, they've identified the harm, and you can see what you're doing, you can see what the people you're influencing are doing, and you just sit there and watch it repetitively happen for months on end or weeks on end or years on end. That says a lot more about your character than having like a bad day where you snap at someone in like a singular comment. It's the track record and the consistent history of that. But like I think that, yeah, like we should try to open conversations to make people feel welcome and be able to be vulnerable in making change. But at the same time, I think that you can't positive reinforcement your way out of like fascism and late stage capitalism. So when we're talking about these like powerful, massive corporations and big entities, like I have a lot less compassion for them because they don't care about any of the people that they negatively impact. So I have compassion for the community of people, but not for these people that are in mass positions of power that are negatively impacting them. My daughter has autism and ADHD. She can explain things beautifully, but only in writing. Even just talking to me, she prefers to message, but it works for her and us. Honestly, yeah, I like writing a lot more. I hate doing phone calls and stuff. But yeah, I have an easier time putting my words in, like my thoughts into words. Usually I've gotten better at speaking out of necessity for YouTube and just having to present stuff at like seminars and like clinics and stuff. But like again, it's like stylistically the way that I explain things isn't everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean that it's not still valid, because we need differing perspectives. And I do think that there is a massive air of ableism and just like perpetuating societal conformist norms that we see when we see neurodivergent people being criticized for things that are like literally a symptom of a trait of their neurodivergency. And people that do that are kind of telling on themselves for the fact that if they are neurodivergent, they either like have conformed or they are not, and they're part of the problem where they're trying to push other people to conform. Genuine question: do you regret your jockey days? No, I don't, because that's ultimately what led me to having my perspectives here. It's kind of the same thing as someone like, oh, if you went back, could you stop your dog from, I mean, not your dog, I don't know why I said dog, stop your dad from having a stroke and almost dying, and like that was one of the most major traumas in my life. Would I go back and change it? No, because it led me to where I am today. And if I changed that, I probably would have been an entirely different person. So I don't, because it gave me context. It gave me capacity to explain what I saw inside the industry and reflect and show people that you can pivot and change your experiences. We're not going to save the world by people never making mistakes in the first place or never agreeing with or supporting things that they later criticize in the first place, because that's just not realistic. Like, everyone's gonna make mistakes and support things and then change their mind when they learn more. And I'm firmly in the camp that anyone who denies that, and anyone who tries to maintain the perspective that they've never done anything wrong and that they've always been an upstanding individual in the horse community, and that they've never had to reflect and change their behavior in any capacity, and that they've never engaged in harmful behavior, I am firmly in the camp that anyone who does that is lying to you, and they have skeletons to hide in their closet. And that's why they tend to attack people so viscerally and angrily when they are able to look at their past mistakes and own up to them and use them as a teaching moment, because they can't do that themselves and it makes them violently uncomfortable. But yeah, like to Big Al, that I have that experience speaking out against rodeo, even with historical proof to counter the honor, the historical cowboy bit. Yes, they get shouted down. Yeah, people don't want to hear anything that forces them to think deeper about the situation they're in. Like, I think we have a world full of people who just want to be able to like move through life without thinking about how anything they do impacts anyone or the greater impact to the community and like how we can improve the world. They just want to be able to act and make decisions without thinking about anything deeper. And it's a shame, because they're being harmed by that too. It's not just harming other people. And like, it's the same type of attitude where I've had people going on my posts. It's like, the FEI is an international corporation. You think they're going to listen to you? There's no point in saying anything. And it's like, dude, if everyone had maintained that perspective historically, anyone who identifies as a woman wouldn't have the right to vote. I probably would have never been born, because Black people never would have been freed from slavery, because people had to go against big, powerful people and fight to make that happen. And initially it was very unpopular to do so. That attitude makes the world worse. And it's also historically inaccurate. And I think people use that type of mindset to justify their own apathy so they don't have to feel guilty about not doing anything and not participating to making the world a better place. Again, it goes to the same thing where there's a lot of people today who are more concerned about maintaining comfort and appearances and not rocking the boat in society, so that they go, I don't want to get political. I don't want to say anything about that, even though it shouldn't be political to be like, hey, like, let's not make horses' mouths bleed, or like, let's not kidnap fucking people out of their houses and throw them into vans and drive away in unmarked vehicles. That shouldn't be controversial. And everyone who does that, you're telling on yourself, because if we were back in the 40s, you would have fucking been complicit in all of that shit, because it wasn't comfortable to call it out then. After everyone already acknowledges that something's bad, it's really easy to jump in and be like, oh yeah, that's bad. Because you don't have to deal with the societal discomfort of speaking out against something, ostracizing yourself from your community, and getting shit on by people around you for making people uncomfortable. It's always harder to engage in advocacy in the moment before something is accepted, because you're not going to be comfortable. You can't be comfortable. It means ending friendships, potentially disrupting family relationships, potentially disrupting your job. Like, it's not going to be comfortable. And there's so many people who love to paint the picture that they would have been an advocate in the past and that they would have stood against the systemic injustices that we've seen that used to be completely legal. But then when you look at them in the present day, they justify things based off of the fact that they're legal by law right now. And that the government said so, and they don't actually look at the humanity aspect of it, or whether or not it's ethical or fair to continue. And it's just a telltale sign that it's like, you wouldn't have been on the right side of history during other instances where people that were not your demographic were being directly targeted, because it would have been easy for you to look away then because you're not being persecuted. And we see that happening everywhere. And like I do like calling that out, because it's like, I don't think you should be able to try to stand on some moral high ground and pretend you would have been a hero back in the day when your actions in present day aren't showing that. Thoughts on mixing equine activism with politics. Equine activism is politics. Horse welfare is political. Look at how the FEI functions. Look at the laws they're trying to pass. Look at how they value elitism. Look at who they allow to corrupt and who they enable. It's all the same evil that we see in our general society. Activism is politics. Full stop. Everything in life is political. Politics are literally where you just vote in your morals and you're advocating for stuff to be in law. People who say that they're apolitical are really just saying, I don't care about what's going on. It doesn't impact me enough to care, so I'm going to not rock the boat, and I'm going to choose my personal comfort even in situations where horrible stuff is going on that is really harming people. And everyone who does that, if stuff does get bad enough to finally impact them, there's going to be no one around to help them because all of those people are already going to have been persecuted. And that's the thing, is we need to stand together before it's too late, and we can't just only care about things when they impact us. That's why it's so important to talk to different communities. And I do think that part of the reason why I've been able to develop this nuanced perspective is because I actually have talked to different communities, and I've immersed myself in a community of marginalized people. And technically I'm like a part of multiple marginalized communities, but I pass as like a white person. So it doesn't really impact me the same way as what other people would experience with racism. But it means that I've been exposed to stuff that has made me think a little bit deeper. So I can't just shrug it off as a non-issue as easily. But like that's an important part of like self-development and like advocacy and stuff. So everything's political, and people who don't see that aren't invested enough in animal welfare to actually see where the policy change works and like the amount of corruption that's leading to certain things existing. Like look at the top sponsors for the FEI and look at like the people who are winning the most in the industry and like where their political affiliations are and what they support and like what financial bracket they're in. And it all becomes very clear. I do have a theory that like people could say this is conspiracy, but I would believe it because the horse world is like the pinnacle of elite society, like at the top levels, especially like top levels of racing, top levels of the FEI sports. It's the pinnacle of elite society. The vast majority of people at those levels are very, very wealthy. And so it is like it's just a mirror image of the ruling class in like a capitalistic world, but within a more niche industry. So disrupting that hierarchy and having these little guys come up and try to hold the people at the top who hold all the power hyper accountable and call them out on stuff that they've tried to normalize, it is the same type of thing. The equestrian media and like all of these news outlets that are specifically for like equestrian sports, a lot of them are owned by people who are at the top level of the sport and have reason to not cover certain topics. So there is a certain level of media corruption in a lot of these news organizations that we're seeing cover horse sports, which is why it's important to look at who owns them. Like Andreas Helgstrand owns Chronicle of the Horse, and they do cover some stuff pertaining to welfare, and I think that's just for optics. But like you can't really deny the fact that there's probably corruption involved if these people who have interests in hiding certain aspects of the sport or creating certain narratives are the ones that are pulling the strings for these news organizations. So it's all connected, and I do understand like it is hard to look at things for what they are and just realize that like the world isn't what you thought it was, and that there's like a lot of struggle and sadness going on. But at the same time, that stuff's not going to change by people looking the other way, because looking the other way is what allows it to keep occurring. But yeah, so I think that like it's important to align politics with everything because they are like interconnected. And I do think that like with the Charlie Kirk thing, there's a reason why the vast majority of creators that are defending his behavior and chose to platform him and chose to make videos about him after his death, the reason why that was the final catalyst for them to get involved in politics, because they hadn't said anything prior, is because they identify with him. And when he was targeted by violence, finally, it felt personal to them because they identify with his traits. And the reason why they did not talk about any of the people of color being targeted by police brutality, people being targeted by ICE and detained illegally, they didn't talk about any of that stuff or all the stuff that came before it, because it was impacting people that don't look like them and people who don't like exist within their demographic. So then they don't care about those things. And I do think that that decision is political and it deserves to be criticized, because ultimately, if that's not what they're trying to do, they can use their platforms to advocate for people who need the media coverage. I think we can all agree, based off of what happened with that whole situation, he didn't need more media coverage. He wasn't getting like his death and the violence wasn't getting downplayed by media. People weren't advocating to not hold anyone accountable for it. it got tons of coverage. It got tons of attention. It still continues to get tons of attention. And there's also a reason why white supremacy groups were uplifted by that and why they used him as a martyr. And I think that anyone that doesn't want to look at that is being disingenuous, and they're intentionally looking away from all of these scholars that talk about systemic racism and systemic injustice that have covered at length why these people exist and why they're figureheads for these movements. People who don't want to look at those things are part of the problem, and they're trying to cover up the fact that they harbor hateful views, but they don't want to admit to it. And then when people point that out, they viciously attack the people who point them out to try to vilify them and paint a narrative around that person being the problem, so that people don't have to look at their own transgressions, because they don't want to be held accountable for what their views say about their character. And ultimately, like, I have more respect for people who have hateful views and have them with their full chest and aren't fucking cowards, because they're not trying to maintain the illusion of being friends with everyone. They're letting you know who they are. More respect for people like that, which that level of respect is very little, than people who harbor the same views but try to operate under the guise of being nice and caring about everyone and being an advocate, because it's just disingenuous. It's like, if you're going to be hateful with your whole chest. Yeah, I agree that like you people just shouldn't, if they're not going to talk about the intersectionality of the issue and the type of person that he was while he was alive, I don't think they should have covered it. I think that it, like, especially if that's the only time that you speak out about politics, there's no way around the fact that it has white supremacy undertones and undertones of not caring about minorities if that's what makes you speak out. And that is a hill I'll die on. And there is a reason why the vast majority of POC communities were not comfortable with that. And the other thing that I'll note about that is people defending Charlie Kirk love to pull up token Black people to be like, look, here is a Black person who agrees with his perspectives. His best friend was a Black woman. But then they don't look at the history that there's always been Black people who've gotten special privileges if they stand behind white supremacy and uplift the status quo. And they have always existed, where they're willing to act outside of their own interests because they personally get benefit from it. It doesn't speak for them being for the greater good of people of color, or the fact that the person that they're protecting is not racist, because there are a lot of people who have internalized racism and uphold white supremacy because of that. So that's another thing that I would watch for in creators, especially white creators. If they tokenize people of color to seek confirmation bias and then make no effort to actually talk to POC creators about what they experience and where they stand, they are part of the problem, and that is still rooted in white supremacy. And like, all of us have perspectives that are rooted in white supremacy because that's what we've grown up surrounded by, and you actively have to seek out alternative perspectives to learn to not be that way. And if they're not willing to do that and they only tokenize POC and uplift POC voices when it's to support their own perspectives, that's rooted in white supremacy. And it is perpetuating racism, whether or not they admit it. And few things grind my gears more than watching white people try to tell POC and marginalized people what oppression looks like to them. And they talk over top of them. They don't listen. They don't seek out alternative sources. They don't actually have it be a conversation. They victimize themselves. They blame other people, and then they tokenize marginalized people. And those are the primary tactics. So if you see all three of those things happening, it's very clear what that person's doing. And whether or not people want to admit to that and accept it, up to them, doesn't change the impact that it has. And being uncomfortable is a necessary component of advocacy and personal growth. So the sheer feeling of being uncomfortable or being criticized doesn't mean that what's being said isn't true or isn't productive or valid. So the tokenization of marginalized people fucking pisses me off. It's ridiculous, and happens a lot. Because you can't do that. It's like what your actions say the most. If you have a Black friend and you're not advocating for POC and talking about the systemic violence against Black people, then you're a shitty friend. It doesn't matter if you have a friend. Like, the other component of that too that I think is harmful is that it's essentially the same thing as trying to claim that men can't be abusers if they have a wife. Like, we know that you can be in a relationship with someone and you can be close to people while actively abusing them physically and emotionally and mentally. So the idea that it somehow doesn't apply to people who have marginalized friends is asinine. And it's just like, it's a cop out for self-reflection, and I can't stand it. So as I'm sure you can tell, because it just fucking pisses me off. I can't stand that shit. People need to be accountable for what their actions say. And if they don't like what people are viewing their actions as, it's well within their capacity to counter that and show that that's not what they meant or that's not how they feel. And if they still choose not to do that, then red flag. A great example of this in pop culture recently would be like the stuff with Sydney Sweeney with the jeans ad. She did an interview about it, and they brought up the fact that people were associating it with white supremacy, and she just was like, oh, if I have an opinion on something, I'll say it, and didn't clarify anything. And it's like, okay, if you're not a white supremacist, and if you're not pandering towards racist people who used your likeness to perpetuate racism, it is very easy to stand for a state to just say that's not what my intent was with that ad. I don't stand for that, and I don't believe in hate. But she fucking tap danced around that to try to pander to both sides of her following so that people could absolve her of being on either side. And she didn't directly support white supremacy and eugenics, but she also didn't explicitly distance herself from it either, which speaks volumes. If someone tried to say that I was racist and that I support white supremacists, you can fucking bet your bottom dollar that the first thing I would be doing would be like clarifying and be like, the fuck no. And here's the like, what can I do to make it more clear that I don't do that? But yeah, so actions speak louder than words. It's easy to claim that you care about those things, but if you're never actually putting any of your time and energy into caring about them, and if you're never actually putting time and energy into listening to the voices of marginalized people, other than when you want to tokenize them, doesn't matter. You could have a million Black friends and you'd be a shitty friend if that's how you're operating in life. But anyways, the world is a fucking crazy place right now. There's a lot of hateful attitudes and lack of empathy and just problematic attitudes being normalized and uplifted. Like a few years back, like there's still like there obviously still were like really highly right-wing fascist people around, but they couldn't be as mask off out in the open. Like I've had actual Nazis comment in my comment section and just go full mask off and just basically be like, Hitler was right. And they're feeling more and more emboldened and comfortable to do so. So like all of these microaggressions and things that people view as small aren't small anymore, because like those small things have uplifted people who were way more openly hateful and extreme in their views than what a lot of these people are. They feel safe because of people being willing to look the other way and because of people being willing to justify this stuff. And again, like I would just, as a tip to white people, if you've not actively tried to engage in anti-racism education, you need to. Because if you haven't, guaranteed you've been either missing microaggressions, participating in covert racism, whether you intend to or not, because intent doesn't matter. You don't have to intend to be malicious to be participating in racist rhetoric. So anyone who hasn't actively immersed themselves in learning about anti-racism efforts and decolonial efforts runs the risk of upholding those mindsets, whether they intend to or not, because it can happen just out of sheer ignorance. So yeah, like I encourage people to consider doing that, and also encourage the people that you support to do the same, especially if you notice them tokenizing people of color. But that kind of sways off from what I was saying from the FEI. But honestly, if you look at the horse world as a whole, like we see these attitudes like more entrenched because the horse industry as a whole is a very white industry and a very elitist industry, and there is a lot of racism within the horse world. So for horse people in particular, it's even more important that they do this work and that they really put the work in to listen to different communities and make sure that they're being a safe place for marginalized people. Because our industry is very, very conservative, and as soon as you open the door to listen to people's experiences, you will find that there's a ton of people who are in marginalized groups that have been attacked and persecuted in the horse industry and had it enabled and just felt so alone in it. And the more people who make an effort to uplift those voices and to speak out on their behalf, they don't have to feel as alone, and it becomes less acceptable to treat people like that. So it might seem like a little thing, but it actually matters quite a lot. But yeah, so just some food for thought, because this industry has a lot of work to do in terms of like becoming more ethical to both people and horses. And I have seen too with the racing industry that people argue against like any criticism of it because they worry about a ban, and they talk about how many people are going to lose jobs and like how many immigrants have jobs because of the racing industry. And this is why I'm not for like a complete immediate ban, because there needs to be an action plan. Otherwise it's just going to be chaos and it's not going to be better for the horses. However, the idea that the only option is to either ignore what we're seeing and make no effort to fix it, or do a complete ban, is just not true. It's a false dichotomy that's used to avoid doing any inner work and looking at what we can improve, because there's enough studies on racing in particular that show where people could make immediate improvements. But yeah, I do, like, to the comment section, I do have memberships turned on now. Oh, do you mean like for gifting a membership? I can double check. I'm new to using it, so I have no idea how it works. But yeah, the memberships are turned on now, and I've uploaded a bunch of videos, and I'm gonna do more stuff on memberships where it's just like behind the scenes videos and personal videos that aren't as edited and stuff that just doesn't make it to the main feed. One, because I feel like I don't have to over explain myself as much for people that are desperate to take what I say out of context and don't watch the whole videos anyways, so I can go more in detail with that type of stuff. And two, then when I'm doing stuff just in my personal life, I don't have to feel like I'm exposing my personal life to as many people who might have malicious intent. So there'll be like more of that stuff, because then I don't have to like curate it for a larger audience. And yeah, behind the scenes stuff with the horses. We'll probably do some members only lives once there's more members. And then like ultimately, yeah, like the membership and like any type of fee associated with my work. Like I still do a ton of free education, and that's not going to stop. I post a lot of free content for people to just consume as they want. But essentially the purpose of like opening up memberships and having these different revenue streams is to just try to like get me into the housing market, because it's all but impossible to do unless you come from like family capital, and I do not. So I got to do a Hail Mary and really try to leverage my business and the community that I've built to try to make that happen. And yeah, so that's why we're doing that. And then there's going to be more content posted on there that'll be like more detailed content, because also I've been getting shadow banned to shit on YouTube for any vlog style videos. And so you don't want to erase a fundamentally abusive industry that destroys hundreds of helpless horses because immigrants are employed by it. No, is that what I said? No, it wasn't. It was that I said a complete immediate ban with no action plan does not help the horses. If you flood an already oversaturated system of unwanted horses with tens of thousands of horses, and you now render the people who are paying for their care jobless and unable to pay for them, even all the owners that would keep and retire their horses now can't, because racing is such a specialized job. And if you've dedicated your life to being in that industry, you don't have skills that are applicable in a lot of other areas, especially that will pay you the same. So now you can't afford your horses, you lose your house, you can't feed them, you have to offload them whether you want to or not. And then now you have a bunch of jobless families and children and people who are not affiliated with the racing industry whatsoever that are shrapnel to all of that. So reform, even if your end goal is a ban, reforming and regulating the industry is the way to that goal, if you actually care about making it so that it's not going to impact the horses as terribly. You cannot just fucking ban something and immediately cease it to exist and have this many horses getting bred and used in that industry and just think that they're all going to just miraculously find homes and be cared for and be safe. That's not realistic. You have to look at the bigger picture. Also, economically, whether you support racing or not, if you just fucking nuked that multi-billion-dollar industry, you would see it in your day-to-day life. Because there's a lot. Can't prove this. I also have a lot of theories about racing being used as money laundering schemes for like the hyper wealthy, which is like another part of the corruption for it, because it's pretty easy to launder money in like gambling and betting. So like it would just completely upset what we are seeing going on in the world order. So you can't just fucking snap your fingers and ban it. would be like, I'm for reform. I also don't think that it necessarily has to be fundamentally abusive. All those horses got turnout, if they were started later, if the equipment regulations were larger, if there was more emphasis on stress behaviors and taking note of the problems in horses, more emphasis on injury prevention and all of these factors, it could be much more ethical than it is. So I don't think it's not in good faith to just deliberately try to take what I said out of context just because you feel emotional about that topic. Like, you're clearly passionate about getting the racing industry fixed, which is great. But having a nuanced perspective where I don't have an idealistic view of how a ban will look, and I don't live in fairy tale land with how a ban will look, doesn't mean that I'm for enabling it existing as is currently. In fact, I said the opposite. And I don't think that it is a morally superior high ground to stand on when you just have this idea, your end goal, but no means of getting there in a way that's going to be safe for the horses or helpful for the people. Because also, again, going back to not fucking vilifying people, I don't think that especially in countries where homelessness is becoming a larger problem than it was, I don't think it's ethical to flood the fucking streets with more homeless people when we don't have resources taking care of the people who are already houseless. Just because you didn't like what their job was before. Like, that's not morally superior. It makes you a hypocrite. We're never going to move ahead in society if we view it as okay to punish some people collectively, including their families, just because you don't like some of their ethical decisions. I think that part of being the bigger person is providing safety nets for all of that, because ultimately what leads people to being more corrupt and harmful is existing in poor circumstances themselves oftentimes, or stressful circumstances or trauma, and having these societal factors that influence their behavior. So I don't think that's ethical. We're not gonna I'm call me a fucking bleeding heart snowflake, but I think that everyone should be fed and housed. And that if we don't have the capacity to organize those safety nets right now, we shouldn't be doing something that's gonna unhouse tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people and animals. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Like, I think that like the prison reform is also another leg of this whole issue where, like, I think that it's inherently problematic to use punishment as a means of like rehabilitating people back to society. Like, prisons should be rehabilitation centers. If you're going to release the people back to the general public, they should be exiting those places with more life skills and more emotional processing and more trauma therapy than what they entered them with. And that's not what's happening, because prison is like a profit driven system. And also what necessitates prison and like cops in general is just like people in underserviced communities not having their needs met and then resorting to crime and not having any safety nets or access to like therapy, food, housing, just everyday care to make sure you grow up to be a well-adjusted person. That's not there. So then we see people committing crimes. And like, again, it's like the lack of nuanced opinion where people look at people that they view as criminals and then they go, these are bad people, but they don't look at like how they became that way. And it's not any different than what we say with horses, where if you look at a behavior that a horse does, just because it endangers you and just because it's not safe and just because it's not what you want to see, doesn't mean that that horse is a fundamentally bad horse and that they're just doing it for no reason, just to be malicious. It all stems from something. So if we deal with the source, then we address the problem. And yes, with the mention of SNAP benefits currently, since slavery is legal in prison in the US, so if you want to keep sourcing workers that you do not have to pay, making the population of people hungry so that they have to start stealing food in order to get by gives you a reason to arrest and imprison them. Like, people are going to start resorting to crime just to live. And then they're going to be enslaved and used for capital and just allow corporations to continue undercutting fees. But yeah, it's like literally some dystopian shit. I find it like not funny, but pretty interesting to watch people who are like cheerleading what's going on right now and they're so okay with it. And then like if you went and you watched like the Hunger Games in theaters with them, they wouldn't be rooting for the Capitol, but yet in real life they are. So Very weird. But it's just, yeah. And also, yeah, the fact that people don't even have health care is fucking nuts. Like, it should not be a controversial topic to say that no one should be bankrupted over like a health issue. Like that's fucking insane. The entire notion that you should have to be able to afford to like live in order to be given the basic necessities of living, that's nuts. Absolutely nuts. Like every time I've talked to my American friends about like them going to the doctor or the hospital, it's bonkers to me. I've never had to pull out a fucking debit card at the hospital, even in emergency. I've never had to pay for any of that. Like our prescription system here could be better because we do still have to pay for prescriptions and some of them are really expensive unless you're in like another medical program. So that could be better, but like as it like you get necessary care for your health. So that whole thing with the healthcare is fucking insane to me. I don't understand. Um, but yeah, it's sad. And I think even for all the people that support all this nonsense, like they would actually be happier if we moved to a more community style society because like humans aren't meant to exist in individualistic culture. And like for all of us, like I should be preaching to the choir in saying this, but like I don't like the idea of having to fucking work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week or more until I'm like 60 and then maybe getting a retirement. That's insane. You just basically don't get to live a life for the vast majority of your life, especially during your healthy years. And then by the time you no longer have to work, your body is like used up and you're tired and you have already spent like 70% of your life. So also, student debt. The fact that you have to have lots of money or be willing to put yourself into debt to get an education is yet another aspect of this elitist thing where people are like, where certain privileges are only given to certain people. Because, like, the thing that I've found the most funny listening to people is like people that are like very pro birth will be like, oh well, what if that baby that got aborted was gonna be the cure for cancer? And it's like, what if the fucking hundreds of thousands and millions of people who cannot fucking afford to eat or get medical care, much less go to school, but are highly intelligent, would be the person that would save the world? What about that? What are the children not getting lunch at school and living with abusive parents would be that if they had different circumstances? It's like, what the fuck are we talking about? Let's take care of the people we have here and provide community resources before pretending that it's pro-life to just try to force people to give birth, but then not give a flying fuck about children once they're already here. And I think my political views and horse views are why so many people have like such a visceral reaction to hating me, because they don't like nuance and they don't like people challenging their perspectives or being called out on the inconsistency in their perspectives, because it is very inconsistent to not think that children should be fed but then also want to force women to give birth. So anyways, Lynn says hello. He's very speepy today. Yeah, Lynn is going back to the vet next week to go get his second round of kitten vaccines. He's going to get microchipped and he's going to be autistic even more after that. Right? Look at the camera. He used to hate being held, and like now look at how chill he is. Like he used to freak out when I picked him up and not like it and go like all like tense. But yeah, this is baby. This is baby. Yeah. The other thing too that people need to look into is that there's just like enough resources on the whole planet to like give to everyone. And the only reason that people are not getting enough is because they're being misallocated for profit. And again, like, how can you look me in the eyes and tell me that like some guy who owns a grocery store chain deserves to be a multi-billionaire more than people deserve to eat? Like, if you think that legitimately, you're being a bad person and you should reflect on that. Like, my only hope is that like a lot of these people will end up learning lessons that make them realize that they've supported the wrong things, and then they'll pivot. Or if we actually succeed in like improving society, they'll realize that it's like they're more cared for and loved and appreciated and that their life is objectively better. If they do that, yeah, the get a job argument. Another reason why I hate Charlie Kirk, man. Someone asked him about paying for children's lunches in elementary schools, and he's like, well, why don't their parents just get a job? And it's like, okay, even pretending for a moment that their parents are just lazy and don't want to work. Let's pretend that that's the reason. Why the fuck should the kids have to pay for that? Why the fuck should the kids go unfed? Like, how can you fucking argue that? Much less, yeah, like a lot of people have multiple jobs and still can't fucking afford shit. So all it takes is a quick little gander at how much the cost of living has risen and how the wages have not followed that. But yeah, anyways, I'm probably gonna go and do horse things soon because we actually have sun today, as you can see, flooding in my windows. But for anyone who's interested in more stuff like this, I'll probably do more of these on the members only page. And I'm going to talk more about certain things on there because there's stuff that I do want to cover that I just don't want to post publicly for people to see because, yeah, I've been going through the ringer, you know. Shit has been do be hitting the fan. Phoebe agrees. Yeah, exactly. Get a job that's still not going to make me a fucking billionaire. The thing I find funny is people who boot like billionaires so badly on the basis that they think that they might one day become one, and it's like, just tell me you don't know how money works without telling me you don't know how money works, and that you don't know how much money $1 billion actually is. The other funny thing is the vast majority of people who defend these things do not own businesses. They are not corporations. They're not self-employed. So they don't even like benefit from the shit that they're defending. I do own a corporation and I am self-employed, and you can get a lot of tax write-offs and shit from doing that. But like even for how small scale I am, like it is pretty crazy that like I can write off whatever I buy that's associated with my business, but then people working minimum wage jobs that have to pay out of pocket for certain things can't necessarily do the same. And like that's not ethical. Like I don't deserve to have more benefit than anyone else does. But yeah, like the minimum wage is supposed to be the minimum wage you needed to be able to afford a house and like sustain a family, and it's for sure not that anymore. Like if the cost of living had gone up normally over the last 2 years, like I would be on track to do everything that they said I could do, like being able to afford a house after high school and like doing all these things. Like I'd be doing very, very well financially if shit hadn't hit the fan the way it has. So yeah, I am definitely a little bit bitter about that because it's fucking stupid. And I could not give two shits about Elon Musk becoming a trillionaire. Couldn't fucking care less. If there's gonna be people who exist without what they need, I think it should be people like that getting a taste of what they're doing to other people and see what it's like. Because if one of those fucking hyper wealthy people had to live in like a minimum wage household and like live the life of the average like low income person, they wouldn't fucking last like a day because they're not used to having to do anything. So yeah, I would love to see, like I would pay so much money to watch a TV show where they just put billionaires into like working class homes and they have to live a working class lifestyle for like a month. Pay so much money to see that. They'd never fucking do it though. Yeah. I wish YouTube had more protection measures for people, especially the very people who are making videos, but I'm glad you have a support system. Yeah, I do too. I wish they kind of held people a little bit more accountable because I do worry about the mob mentality on YouTube and like how it can be weaponized. Obviously speaking from personal experience because yeah, like I've been getting fucking harassed and just like mistreated and like that just, it's not, regardless of what's going on, it's just not what should be happening. And I don't think that people should have to deal with that. And I also don't think that people really realize like just how many notifications you're getting once you have a certain following or like a certain number of people coming onto your page just specifically to be shitty. So yeah. But anyways, yeah, the AI stuff's really fucked up too. There's so much AI posting on Facebook that doesn't get flagged as AI. And if you go to the comments, it's just like full of old people that think that it's real. And that's really scary too. And I'm also concerned about AI being used by people who are looking for confirmation bias to basically just say anything they want to believe is real and not AI, even when it is. And then anything that they don't want to accept, they'll claim that it's AI, even if it's real. And that's concerning. And I think the fact that the US president has already been using a fuck ton of AI in all of the posts on official pages, very concerning because ironic that the guy that complained about fake news so much is fucking producing fake news. But yeah. But yeah, no, our society is failing. It, billionaires should not exist when people are starving. And like the fact that that's a controversial statement to say that pisses people off who aren't and never will be a billionaire, even in multiple lifetimes, um, crazy. People have become so fucking brainwashed, and it's like I don't give a shit about billionaires. Um, like there's some like advocacy posts that I've like withheld from sharing because I didn't want people to get on my ass about them, but like I'm gonna just start sharing them because they're about SNAP benefits. And it's like if you see someone stealing from like a big chain grocer and no, you didn't, and the fact that that's controversial when people aren't getting fed and they can't fucking afford shit, that you have to narc on them when they're stealing from a multi-billion-dollar corporation, like shut the fuck up. I could not care less. If you're more angry about a poor person stealing food from a fucking billion-dollar company than you are about a billion-dollar company existing and continuing to generate more and more wealth by depriving people of basic needs, your priorities are fucking skewed as hell. So yeah, I don't give a shit. Honestly, like I think that people should be taking stuff back from billionaires because they're robbing wages from everyone. So not saying you should steal from big multi-billion-dollar chain grocers, but I'm also saying that like, I mean, they're stealing from you. But and again, like the fact that some people who would watch this would go, "Wow, Shelby's a bad person. She's encouraging stealing." Meanwhile, they uplift and support white supremacists and billionaires. But, yeah. Anyways, as you can tell, I'm a little bit fucking bitter about that. Yeah. Yeah, generative AI is getting very scary because I've also seen like deep fakes of people making porn of people that like are not in it. And like it could be a deep fake of anything. And that's something that I'm really scared of, where it's like if anyone who wants to go on any type of vindictive smear campaign can a lot easier because of AI. And that's concerning because like with Photoshop and stuff, it was already like easy enough to at least do photos that were edited and like do them well if you're good at it. But you can you can't you can do it way easier with videos now. Like AI videos are getting very very good. It's been crazy to see like how well generative AI has gone for like horse stuff because it used to suck, and now it's just getting more and more and more realistic, which is scary. Stasha Lawrenson, you're so confused. I don't think I am. I think you're confused being here though. But thank you for commenting on my post to say that. I don't agree with you at all. But thanks for weighing in. You know. Thank you. If I'm confused for thinking that people should be fed and housed instead of billionaires getting richer, I'm fucking happy to be confused. I don't want to be what you view as educated then, because that's fucked up. If being educated is supporting the starvation of human beings just so billionaires can get richer, get fucked. Sorry. Billionaires can get fucked. I'll shit on billionaires all day. And I already do, but I'll shit on them all day. No matter how hard you lick their boots, they're not gonna fucking care about you. They don't care. You're never gonna be one. You're never gonna be a billionaire, no matter how hard you defend them. And they love the fact that you're defending them and pointing fingers at everyone else. They love that because their propaganda has worked on you, and they love that you're that gullible. So just saying, billionaires can get fucked, and that should not be a controversial statement. Shouldn't be controversial to say like if we were watching any animal, like I saw the post that's like if we saw a monkey that was hoarding all of the fucking bananas in the forest while all the monkeys around it starved, we would study it because we would go, that's a fucked up behavior. Meanwhile, people do that to other human beings and we go, oh, like that's just like they just work really hard. A billionaire does not work fucking hundreds of thousands of times harder than people. Like the whole point in being rich is so you don't have to fucking do shit. Like they don't work harder than the single mom working 2 jobs to feed her fucking kids. It's just a load of shit. Like I can't stand that stuff. It's illogical, and like all of the people who uphold this stuff have to rely on just ad hominem text. You're so confused. You're so stupid. You're just a sensitive snowflake because they can't fucking justify what they stand for. Even they can't because it doesn't even make sense. Like at its core, you're defending someone being so exorbitantly wealthy that some of these people own more, like have more money and assets than entire countries worth of people do. And you think that is more necessary than people being able to eat every day. So sorry for roasting you, Stasha, but you did come on here to try to tell me that I'm confused. So I'm gonna roast you. But yeah, happy to be confused if that's what fucking being confused is, man. Like honestly, like the fact that it's controversial to just say everyone should have food. I cannot wait until the attitude that thinks that that's controversial ages poorly and we see power being like redistributed. Hi, why are you? I'm on live, man. What are you doing?
Oh, you're on live?
Yeah.
So I should like wave and say hi?
You can if you want. That's my brother.
Bad words.
Yeah. Yeah, no, if people want to cry about it, they can. I think that the fact that people think it's more bullying to just look at actions and call them out and be like, hey, like you're supporting the starvation of human beings. And they think that's bullying, but then they don't think telling people that they're stupid or like to shut up or that they're confused is not. I don't know. I think it's bullying to starve people. But yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna go do horse things and change. And also, yeah, check out my. I always go the other way because it's mirrored. But check out my sweet skull. Lint just ran by. That's not my boyfriend. That's my brother. just yeah, my brother's just fixing something outside. They're building like a shelter thing for my mom's trailer. So yeah, my boyfriend's hiding in his room right now.
I'll steal your coffee.
Yeah, go for it. Hi, Phoebe. Hi, Phoebe. This is Phoebe. This is Peebs. Phoebe, you can. She looks like a seal. I don't really see her nose. But yeah, anyways, I'm gonna run. But if people like these lives and me bitching about billionaires more, I'm gonna do that a lot on my memberships one because I get fucking shadow banned when I talk shit about the ruling class. So that's a big bummer. So yeah. Yeah, I'll post lots of Banksy stuff too. And like once I start working with the horses more, I'll post them too. It's just been there's been a lot of stuff going on like welfare wise with this FEI rule revision, and then also just I straight up just haven't had energy and the desire to like work with my horses and go out and do things because I've been dealing with so much stress online and just being harassed. And I would be lying if I said that it didn't impact my mental health. I would very much prefer that people just shit talk me on their own pages and not feel the need to come to my page to tell me that. But yeah, it's been fine, but it's just not fun. So we'll talk about that more on like memberships only because I want to give more personal context for why I think what's happening is so toxic and give people details on like traits that I've personally witnessed in abusive relationships that I've had and how I'm watching them be replicated towards me right now. And it's very fucking triggering, but we'll like that might be too on the nose for like everyone else to see. So I'm going to go in more detail on memberships because I'm also afraid of those partners seeing what I say and trying to harm me. So anyways, that'll be in more detail on memberships. But thank you to anyone who subscribes. And if I do ever buy a farm, we'll have a fucking raging house party and you can come. So I have a playlist called I Bought a House playlist, and it's gonna be for the party that I have if I ever buy a house. So anyways, have a good day everybody. Bye bye.